Okay, so in this part of the test, Unit 3 test prep, we are going to focus pretty much simultaneously on the last three sections. That is on the part of the study guide that has the phrase more on determinism, hard determinism, libertarianism, and compatibilism, which you now know from following the other video, I refer to also as soft determinism, not only in the test prep videos, but also the test. So don't forget to keep that in mind. All right, so the way that I've decided to do the video for these three sections is to actually go through the reading. So the best thing that you can do right now is you should reread what I have here under more on determinism and hard determinism, and then skip libertarianism for now. And I'm just trying to prep you to get the most out of this part of the video, and then reread what I have about compatibilism in the study guide. Once you've done that, continue the video, and I'm going to walk you through relevant sections of the reading, and then we'll hit libertarianism, that's metaphysical libertarianism, last. All right, so assuming that you have reread those sections, I want to call your attention to the fact that I do say more on determinism, and then I say hard determinism here. For each of the theories, I do want you to know what their take is on metaphysical determinism. Okay, do they accept it? Do they endorse it? Do they reject it? Do they deny it? You were first introduced to that when you were in section 3.0 of metaphysics. 2.6 of the reading, where you were being introduced to the problem of free will and determinism. And so here I say for each of the three theories, I say you need to know what they basically have to say about metaphysical determinism as it relates to whether or not they think free will is a possibility and hence moral responsibility. So this is just continuing on with that theme. But what I'm showing you here in the study guide is that you're probably going to get some additional questions, some more in-depth questions, some more clarifying items, and the choice of multiple choice and true false to further test your understanding of, each theory's take on, metaphysical determinism, acting free, and moral responsibility. The better you understand metaphysical determinism, the better you will do on the exam. Now, as I showed you, you are first introduced to metaphysical determinism in section 2.0. And to be precise, you were first introduced to it, let's see. Actually, it's not section 2.0, it's section 2.6. Oh, 2.5. Okay, I'm incorrect again. All right, so let's go to section 2.6. You were first introduced to what is really metaphysical determinism. He just calls it determinism here because there's also something called social determinism, which is a kind of also determinism, maybe even a kind of metaphysical determinism. But it's always better to think of, I like to say metaphysical determinism when you're talking about determinism generally. So you do get a basic introduction here, and the information is here. You might want to have a sheet of notes just on determinism that pulls from page 121, pulls from all the information here. But then to get the rest of the lesson and the rest of the points that you need to do well on the test for those last three sections in the study guide, you want to pull from main points and jot down points from 2.6. And like I said in another video, it can be confusing that Lawhead decides to tell you more about the more general theory of metaphysical determinism within the discussion of hard determinism. So he almost makes it seem like if you are into metaphysical determinism, then you must be a hard determinist, and that's not necessarily true. Okay, so I'm having problems with my little slider bar here. Give me a second. Okay, so what I want to show you right now is that he does begin talking about hard determinism at the beginning. So he is focused on that. And then he slides over into the debate about metaphysical determinism itself, right? So the idea that everything is the event of prior causes, okay? So then he switches back over to a discussion. And he needs to because the hard determinist does endorse metaphysical determinism, and that's has major implications for what separates the hard determinist from the libertarian. So he slides back into a discussion of metaphysical determinism itself. Then he's like, okay, let's look at the case for hard determinism. And one of the first things he does, which is relevant to the study guide, is he makes what's called the negative case for hard determinism. All right. So by a negative case or a negative argument in philosophy, what is meant by that is that you don't necessarily argue for a theory to make the case for a theory. You simply argue against other theories and imply or explicitly claim that the theory that you endorse is better. So Lawhead, of course, we don't really know which theory he endorses, but the idea is that a hard determinist can make the negative case for its own theory by arguing that libertarianism and soft determinism or compatibilism are problematic. So again, you make a negative case for an argument by pointing out that there are problems with other arguments or other theories with which you disagree. And that's what's going on here. So you do need to know the problems with libertarianism as it's presented in 2.6, because this is where Lawhead is presenting to you the negative case for hard determinism, for determinism, okay? Now, that brings us to, so this is where it gets confusing. He's surveying the case for hard determinism, but as he's discussing the problems of libertarianism, he's actually making the negative case for metaphysical determinism. That said, in making the negative case for metaphysical determinism in this section of the reading, he's also making the case for part of what is endorsed and accepted by the hard determinist, but also the soft determinist or the compatibilist. And so that's one thing that I think Lawhead does a terrible job with here, and I might even need to do a pre-lecture on this from now on. But just know that the problems that are being pointed out with libertarianism, the negative case that is being made for metaphysical determinism in virtue of what you see here, would be arguments, would be critiques that both the soft determinist, aka the compatibilist, and the hard determinist would make. So keep that in mind with respect to your study guide. I don't want you to think that when he says, I'm going to make the negative case for hard determinism, and then he starts showing you critiques from metaphysical determinism, okay? And then, of course, I'm thinking about the principle of universal causation and prior causes, that only applies to hard determinism. Okay, so whatever you learn here about libertarianism and what's problematic with it, okay, is going to be accepted and endorsed by both the soft determinist and the hard determinist. And so there's basically three criticisms of libertarianism that make the case for metaphysical determinism and the principle of universal causality, which by implication makes the case for both hard determinism and soft determinism. All right, so that's very important to know. The positive case for determinism. So notice, he's not saying here, right, hard determinism or soft determinism, because again, he's talking about the more general theory about causality, that there's a cause that every event has a cause, or every thought, action, decision, feeling, emotion has a cause, and each one of those is the result of a prior cause. So he has to say that this is the positive case for determinism, aka metaphysical determinism, because although this is being given to you within the chapter on hard determinism, he is now kind of going up a level and focusing on the more general theory and making the positive case not only for metaphysical determinism, but by implication, again, hard determinism and soft determinism. So the positive case is where you argue your position by offering evidence that supports your view of something. So here it's offering evidence or argument that supports their view that everything is causally determined by prior events. So it's not done by critiquing other views or other theories and showing there's deficits, but arguing just in favor of your own theory and what it has to offer. All right, so this is really important to keep in mind as well. And so he basically starts his negative case for metaphysical determinism, and hence at least one aspect of hard and soft determinism on page 120 9, and he wraps it up, I guess, on page 130. And nope, it continues on page 130. So yeah, he does wrap it up. And then the positive case for metaphysical determinism, and hence at least one aspect of hard determinism and soft determinism, he begins to make the positive case for the more general theory and the kinds of determinism that you've learned about on page 130, and continues with the positive case for this onto and all the way through page, I believe, 133. Let's see. Oh, yeah, 132. One thing I am going to stress is make sure you pay attention to what he says about theological determinism. You definitely want to take note of that. But again, this applies to the case for metaphysical determinism, and by implication, both soft and hard determinism. He then goes on to talk about, right here, what is this? Oh, so then he brings up some objections that can be made. The objections are against metaphysical determinism. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind as well. So the response that is given to people who want to argue that metaphysical determinism is false, what he's presenting here are the responses that a metaphysical determinist would present. So both a hard and a soft determinist might give the same responses to the same objections that might come from a libertarian. And of course, we're talking about metaphysical, not political libertarianism in this chapter. And then finally, in his chapter, or in this section, and I think we're in 2.6, where he gets to the denial of moral responsibility. This is when Lawhead begins to focus solely, again, on hard determinism. Now, he ought to and should and did a good job of talking about metaphysical determinism. I just think he should have done it in its own section, like made that its own section, like 2.6, and made hard determinism 2.7. Or he should have just had a special section in 2.5 to get into metaphysical determinism more in depth in that chapter. That said, this is where he begins to focus again only on hard determinism. But just keep in mind that he had to also, that metaphysical determinism applies to hard determinism. And it's because of hard determinism's endorsement of metaphysical determinism, that they have the view about moral responsibility. So I just want to call your attention to the fact that he begins to link up, the hard determinist response to the third statement from section 2.5 to the third statement to the second statement. So he begins to link the second statement, endorsement of the second statement, which is presented in 2.5, to the third statement. And so it begins on page 134, and then it goes all the way to page I think it's 137, but I'm not for sure. 138, yeah. Read through this very carefully. You're definitely going to need to have some insights provided here. And then at the end of this section, you have some stuff on Benedict Baruch Spinoza, a kind of hard determinist. You do have a couple of test items on Spinoza. You do need to know what the name of his theory is. There will be no word bank or answers to select from, so know what that theory says. And then, of course, know about the falling stone story, which is posted here below. And the Spinoza stuff is all on page 139. Might continue a little bit onto page 140. Okay, so now let's switch over to soft determinism. Okay, so I skipped libertarianism for now, but here we have the name of this theory, compatibilism. Lawhead does note on page 155 that sometimes compatibilism is called soft determinism. Read what he says about that and the meaning of soft, keeping in mind that in the test, you may see the use of soft determinism to refer to the theory that the word compatibilism is used. So just make sure that you're aware of that whenever you are doing the test. So here he has the case for compatibilism or soft determinism. Now, he did say in the introduction, he's like, look, a lot of what I applied to hard determinism, or a lot of what I said about hard determinism is true of soft determinism, so I'm not going to repeat that. That's why you don't see him, again, repeating the positive and negative case for soft determinism. because all that stuff I just reviewed with you in 2.6 that was focused for a little bit on just metaphysical determinism, like I said before, is also accepted by the compatibilist, the soft determinist. So then what's going on really in section 2.8 is he is making the positive case for soft determinism. The negative case for soft determinism, or part of the theory of soft determinism, is what he provides as the negative case and the positive case for general metaphysical determinism in the section that's supposed to be focused on hard determinism. All right, so make sure you read through all of this very carefully. A number of these paragraphs have information and insights relevant to what you see on the study guide. Reading the introduction will not be enough. You'll need to look through this to get the deeper insights and whatnot, including the stuff that has to do with Stace. Don't rely only on that which is in yellow highlight, and the stuff in yellow highlight is helpful and definitely something to pay attention to. But if you're going through the Smart Book assignment for this, or a recharge, or just using the ebook, you want to pay careful attention to what you are going through. This is one of the shorter sections, maybe the shortest section in here, so keep that in mind. Another thing that you might, let me see, wait a minute. Is there anything else that I wanted to cover with respect to this? No. All right, so then let's focus on the other theory of libertarianism. Okay, so please remember that we are not talking about political libertarianism. We are talking about metaphysical libertarianism. Make sure that you read carefully through, this section. Something to point out is where he's talking about the problems with determinism. So here, what is he doing? He is making the negative case for metaphysical libertarianism, all right? So again, think back to what I said earlier in this video. When we say that somebody's making the negative case for, the negative argument for, they're saying, hey, the way I'm going to argue for my theory is to show you that the alternative has major deficits that are not reasonable to accept or, include in one's thinking. And then the idea is that, well, my theory doesn't have these deficits, therefore it's the better theory. So that's called making a negative case. So you might, you do need to keep this in mind, because I might ask you which of the following was made as part of the negative case for soft determinism, right? So that's what this section is focusing on. The negative case for metaphysical libertarianism and its position on metaphysical determinism. Remember that metaphysical libertarianism is what you would call is a theory that endorses what's called metaphysical indeterminism. Okay, so then you go through here and you've got the little critiques of metaphysical determinism. Keep in mind that as you're reading the problems with metaphysical determinism, that what? You have to remember that both the hard determinists and the soft determinists endorse metaphysical determinism. So whatever critiques are made in section 2.7 of metaphysical libertarianism, whatever critiques are made about metaphysical determinism are also critiques of at least one aspect of hard determinism and soft determinism. Here we've got the positive arguments for metaphysical libertarianism. So you've got the gist of each. Know the gist of each of these positive cases. So there's 3 right there. You don't need to know every single detail, but you need to know the gist. Starting with the subtitle is good. Maybe in your notes write 2 or 3 points that you think are the most important, that get to the most direct information you're supposed to get from each of those. It's always helpful to reread some of this as you're looking at the study guide. Remember, this trips students up sometimes. Agency theory is a kind of metaphysical libertarianism. Students tend to confuse agency theory and some of its concepts with soft determinism or compatibilism. Really pay attention to the specific words naming the concepts, the terminology of the agency theorist versus the terminology of the soft determinist. Remember, there are some libertarians in the form of agency theorists who would agree completely with Stace and some of his terminology and concepts, but they each have their own language or terms for talking about free will and why it's possible. And of course, they don't think exactly the same. Remember, agency theory is a form of metaphysical libertarianism, therefore it rejects metaphysical determinism, but not soft determinism. It accepts metaphysical determinism, but still agrees with agency theory, a form of metaphysical libertarianism, that free will is possible. But make sure you're really clear on these words being part of the terminology for agency theory. And remember that agency theory is a form of metaphysical libertarianism. What else do I want to say about that? Yeah, so, jot down maybe a few points from those paragraphs. And then really you can stop there. I think I have in the study guide that you stop on page 149. Don't worry about the stuff that comes afterwards.